Let's do a Python beginner project, a number guessing game. This is one of the most common beginner projects. To improve the exercise, we'll be sure to be using good coding conventions like docstrings. Let's first plan what this game will do. When the game starts, it will prompt you for a number guess. This will need to be between 0 and 100 since that is what interval we'll be using for the game. If the guess is too high, we'll tell the player to guess lower, and if the guess is too low, we'll tell the player to guess higher. This will go on until the correct number is guessed. Let's get started. We will contain this game in a class named Game. In this class, we'll have 4 functions: the initialization function, start game, get user guess, and check guess. The initialization function will only create the class variable target num, which will be the number the player needs to guess. Next, let's set up our getUserGuess function. This function will retrieve the guess from the player using Python's input function. We'll use a try-except block to ensure the guess is a valid integer. In this case, that means ensuring the input was a number and not a letter first. Then, we ensure the number is an integer and not a float, meaning the number is a whole value and there's no decimals trailing. Once that's confirmed, we make sure the guess is in between the interval for valid numbers we set, which is 0 and 100 inclusive. If all these pass, the integer is returned by the function. Otherwise, the player is prompted again to enter a valid guess. Next, let's work on our checkGuess function. Here we simply take the integer guess and check it against our target number. If it's lower than the target number, we tell the player to guess a higher number. If it's too high, we tell the player to guess a lower number. In each case, we also return false since the guess was incorrect. If the guess was correctly the target number, we tell the player they got it right and we return true. Lastly, let's set up the start game function. This function is simple. We use the Python random module, which we imported above, to select a random number between 0 and 100 inclusive. We then use an infinite loop to keep the player guessing until the target number is guessed, in which case the game ends. Now, set up the underName block and run the application. What are some additional things we can add to improve the program? Well, we can let the player choose the interval instead of having it set to 0 to 100. We can add a way to play again without having to restart the application, perhaps by adding a new menu to this terminal. We can use tkinter to create a nicer UI for the game, which is definitely something I always recommend. And that is a number guessing game in Python.